It was a cold, quiet night. One of those late-night drives when everything around you feels strangely still. The kind where the world outside your car seems to disappear into the darkness. I was driving home from a small get-together. The kind where you stay longer than you should and then realize how late it's gotten once you step outside. It had been a long week, and I just wanted to get home and crash. The roads were mostly empty, and I was glad for it. The only sound in the car was the hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of the radio, trying and failing to find a signal. It was around 2:30 a.m. when the gas light flickered on. The warning didn't seem too urgent at first. Maybe I can make it home, I thought. I'll stop at the next gas station. But as time passed, I began to realize that the next gas station wasn't going to appear anytime soon. The empty stretch of highway I was on felt like it went on forever. I checked the gauge again. The needle was barely above the E. Great, I muttered to myself. I'm going to be one of those idiots who runs out of gas at the worst possible time. I pulled over, turned on my hazard lights, and started to look for my phone. I had full bars but no service. I sighed, frustrated. In that moment, I was entirely alone. The road deserted for miles in both directions. No lights, no cars. Just me and the wilderness around me, the darkness so thick it almost felt like it was closing in. I sat there for a minute, trying to think of what to do. My mind raced. Should I walk to find help? I didn't even know how far the nearest town was. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Something caught my eye. I thought I saw a figure standing on the side of the road about 100 yards back. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights or maybe some shadow cast by the trees, but the figure didn't move. It was just standing there, facing the road, as if waiting. I blinked, convinced it was nothing, but then I saw it again, this time more clearly. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, dressed in dark clothes, standing still as stone. Something about the way he stood, his posture was off, like he wasn't just standing, he was waiting for something, or maybe someone. I felt a cold rush of fear sweep through me, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just a passerby, someone stranded like me. It was the middle of the night after all. People do weird things at night, but the longer I stared, the more I felt the hair on the back of my neck prickle. There was something unsettling about him, about the way he didn't even move. I could see the faint silhouette of his face in the dim light, and though I couldn't make out details, I could swear he was looking straight at me. I started the engine again. No way I was sitting there any longer. But as I put the car in gear and turned to pull back onto the road, I saw something in the corner of my eye. The man wasn't alone anymore. There were two more figures, dark, indistinct shapes just behind him, still as silent as statues. My heart skipped a beat. I slammed my foot on the gas, adrenaline flooding my veins. The engine sputtered, struggling. Come on, I whispered to myself. Please just work. And then it died. Complete silence. I sat there paralyzed. The headlights cast long, eerie shadows on the road, illuminating nothing but the dark emptiness around me. My mind was racing. I grabbed my phone again. No service. I was stuck. In that moment, I realized something worse than just running out of gas. Those figures weren't moving, but they were closer now. The man, the ones behind him, they were closer than before. Not by much, but enough for me to feel the shift. They hadn't been standing in front of my car earlier. Now they were. My throat went dry, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then something strange happened. The man smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was wide, too wide, like it stretched unnaturally across his face. His teeth gleamed in the dim light, sharp, jagged. A smile that didn't belong in the real world. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my body trembling with terror. The other two figures didn't smile. They just stood there, staring, watching. I didn't know what to do. My thoughts were a mess. I should have gotten out and tried to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. The man took a slow step forward, then another. I finally snapped out of it, throwing the car into reverse. I stomped on the gas pedal, and the wheels spun in place, tires screeching against the asphalt. But the car didn't move. I screamed in frustration, trying again, the engine sputtering helplessly. And then, a sound, a knock. It came from the side of the car, near my window. I didn't dare look. I couldn't. I just pressed myself into the seat, trying to become as small as possible. The knock came again, louder, insistent. I couldn't hear any voices, just that strange knocking. The figures, they were gone. I don't know how long I sat there, my hand still clutching the wheel, trying to steady my breath. I eventually mustered the courage to look around. There was nothing. No man, no figures. Just the empty, dark road. I don't remember how I got the car started again, but somehow I managed. I drove the rest of the way home without looking back. My gas gauge was still on empty. I haven't been able to explain what happened that night. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe a trick of the mind. But every time I drive alone at night, I keep checking the rearview mirror. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that something was watching me. And if I'd stayed just a little longer, I'm not sure I'd be here to tell you this story. It was a cold, quiet night when it happened. I remember glancing at the dashboard of my car as I drove down the dark, winding road, only for the low fuel light to blink on. I wasn't exactly in the middle of nowhere, but it felt like it. The road was barely lit, the trees on either side stretching out like dark arms, and the occasional flicker of distant streetlights was the only thing breaking the oppressive darkness. I thought I could make it to the next town, just a few miles ahead. But somewhere along the way, my car began to stutter. The engine coughed once, twice, then fell completely silent. I swore under my breath as the car rolled to a stop. The headlights illuminated only the road in front of me, a patch of asphalt that seemed to stretch forever into the night. No houses, no lights, just trees and shadows. I sat there for a moment, trying to gather myself. I was alone, just me and the quiet hum of the night around me. There was no cell service, typical really, considering I always seemed to end up in spots where I couldn't get a signal. I had no choice but to step out and start walking. My phone was nearly dead anyway, so I didn't see much use in keeping it with me. The chill of the air hit me the moment I opened the door, making me hesitate for a second. But I shook it off. I needed gas, simple as that. The road was empty, but there was something unnerving about the silence, like the night was waiting for something. My boots crunched against the gravel as I began walking, the faint light from my car's headlights fading behind me. As I walked further, my breath coming in little puffs of white, I began to hear something. It was subtle at first, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. But then, I thought I heard something else. A footstep maybe, but it couldn't be. I stopped walking and looked behind me. Nothing. Just the same empty road, the same dark trees. Still, that feeling. the one that says someone's watching you, didn't go away. My skin prickled, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I kept walking. I had to keep moving forward. Another 5 minutes passed, and I saw it. A small, old gas station. The kind that was barely open even in the daytime. The flickering neon sign overhead looked almost broken, its light barely cutting through the darkness. It was the only sign of life in the entire stretch of road, so I headed toward it, feeling a little relieved. But as I got closer, I saw something strange. The door to the station was slightly ajar, as if it had been hastily left open. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. Still, I had no other choice. I needed gas, and I didn't want to walk back to the car in the cold. I pushed the door open slowly, wincing as it creaked loudly in the otherwise silent night. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed faintly, but there was no one behind the counter. The shelves were mostly bare, and the register looked old, ancient even. The place felt off. I didn't know how to explain it, but it was like the air was thick, heavy. Then I heard it, a sound, quiet, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. A soft thud, followed by the creak of floorboards somewhere deep in the back of the station. I froze. My heart rate spiked, and I instinctively looked around, searching for the source. But there was no one, no movement, just the hum of the lights above. The thud came again, and this time it was louder. I wanted to turn and leave, but I couldn't. Something about the place. It felt like it was pulling me in. I stepped forward slowly, trying to stay as quiet as possible. I was about to call out, to ask if anyone was there, but before I could, the sound stopped. And then, the lights above me flickered. Once, twice. Then everything went black. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't see a thing now. The darkness was absolute, pressing in around me. I could hear my own heart beating in my chest. But that wasn't what terrified me the most. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps. They were coming closer. I didn't know whether to run or to hide. My mind raced, but my body stayed frozen. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until I swore they were right behind me. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and I saw him. A man standing in the doorway to the back room. He was tall, too tall, with a face that was almost too pale, like he hadn't seen daylight in years. He just stared at me with wide, unblinking eyes. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at him. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he vanished into the darkness at the back of the station. No noise, no footsteps, just gone. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, I snapped out of my trance. I ran. I ran out of that station as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my car. I didn't look back. I didn't even care about the gas anymore. I just wanted to get away. I drove straight to the nearest town, shaking the whole way. I haven't been able to forget the feeling of his eyes on me. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I do know one thing. I will never stop for gas at an abandoned station again. And if you ever find yourself on a dark road in the middle of nowhere with no one around, don't get out of your car. Trust me, you're better off running out of gas.